Welcome to The Explainer. Look, we've got a wildly chilling, honestly pretty complex string of events to unpack today. Over the last few years, a string of top-tier scientists, military contractors, and personnel deeply connected to national security have either vanished or died under some seriously mysterious circumstances. We're talking about individuals with major ties to nuclear facilities, cutting-edge aerospace research, and top-secret defense programs. The circumstances surrounding these cases are eerie. The timelines are incredibly suspicious, and the questions they raise, well, they're immense. So let's dive right into the evidence.
Right, so this is the ultimate question we're trying to answer. Are we just witnessing a string of totally unrelated, tragically prosaic events? A devastating mix of mental health crises, random accidents, and your standard criminal cases? Or is there something darker here? Are these disappearances pointing to a nefarious, overarching conspiracy to silence people who know just a little too much about classified aerospace and non-human intelligence programs? Our goal in this explainer is to objectively map out the facts for you. We're not taking a side here. We are simply looking at what the evidence and the experts are actually telling us.
Here's our docket for today. Number 1, a string of disappearances. Number 2, the missing general. Number 3, the whistleblower connection. Number 4, anti-gravity and suspicious deaths. And finally, number 5, conspiracy or tragic coincidence.
Okay, Section 1, a string of disappearances.
Ground zero for these recent mysteries is actually New Mexico. It's home to some of the country's most secretive defense and nuclear facilities. And our first case study is Melissa Casillas. She worked as an assistant at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. That's the highly secure nuclear facility where the atomic bomb was famously developed. So she was first reported missing last June when she simply didn't show up for work one day. But what makes this case so puzzling is what she left behind. Her purse, her phone, and her ID were all found completely untouched at her home. Then, after being missing for nearly a year, police recently discovered her remains in a national forest about 70 miles away, with a gun recovered near her body.
Now, the really chilling reality here is that Casillas' case is not an isolated incident. Journalist Chris Mallory has spent months closely tracking these events, and he points out that several New Mexico nuclear and military contractors have vanished over the last year in an almost identical, untraceable fashion. The pattern is striking, honestly. They walk out of their homes, they leave literally all their electronics and traceable IDs behind, and they just vanish off the face of the earth. And the one undeniable connecting thread? They all operate within the highly sensitive sphere of New Mexico's defense and nuclear research complex.
Moving on to Section 2, the missing general.
This brings us to a guy whose disappearance has totally shocked the defense community, 68-year-old William McClawson. He's the former commander of research for the Air Force Research Laboratory, which is an institution long rumored to be tied to classified UFO research. He vanished from his New Mexico home in late February. Now, his wife reported that he only had common clearances since retiring 13 years ago. She said he'd recently suffered a 20-pound weight loss, was dealing with extreme anxiety, and even took a sleep drug the very night he vanished. But an entirely conflicting narrative has emerged. An anonymous caller told investigating officers a completely different story. This caller claimed she actually had dinner with him the night before he vanished alongside members of the Space Force. She said he acted spacey, and crucially, she alleged he maintained a highly classified security clearance to the point that his exact name appears in newly released UFO index documents.
So how could two wildly different accounts exist at the exact same time? Well, it requires an understanding of compartmentalization. This is a fundamental security principle within the military and intelligence apparatus. The whole architecture of secrecy dictates that individuals are only granted access to information absolutely essential to their specific duties. It's like a giant puzzle where no one has all the pieces. Experts note that high-ranking intelligence officials simply cannot tell their partners or loved ones what they are actually doing. So, it is entirely possible and frankly standard practice that McCausland's wife genuinely had absolutely no idea what level of security clearance he still maintained or what covert projects he was continuing to advise on.
All right, we're going to pivot now from the sprawling deserts of New Mexico over to the political center of Washington, D.C. to look at the tragic fate of a 39-year-old man named Matthew Sullivan.
Section 3, the whistleblower connection.
Sullivan's case pulls us directly into the broader context of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, and the whistleblowers who are trying to bring hidden information to light. The timing of these events is exactly why eyebrows were raised in Washington. In 2024, Matthew Sullivan died of an accidental drug overdose. This tragedy occurred just weeks before he was scheduled to sit down and be interviewed by lawmakers specifically regarding UFOs. And Sullivan wasn't just some random bystander. He was a close colleague of the most prominent UAP whistleblower in recent history.
That whistleblower is former Air Force intelligence officer David Grush. You might remember, Grush recently testified under oath that the United States government runs a top-secret, multi-decade program to reverse engineer non-human spacecraft. When addressing his own safety, Grush stated, "I had some unique things happen in my personal life, some intimidation." What is absolutely vital to note here is the official response to that. The Inspector General of the intelligence community rigorously investigated Grush's claims of being threatened and officially deemed them credible and urgent. So the threats were real.
But how does Grush view his colleague Sullivan's sudden death? Well, television producer Miguel Sancho spoke directly with Grush about this exact topic. Grush, who maintains a very cautious and analytical approach, stated that he doesn't immediately see a direct connection between all of these dozen or so disappearances, and that includes Sullivan's overdose. However, Grush does find the case of General William McCaslin to be extremely concerning. In fact, within intelligence circles, McCaslin is viewed by many as the linchpin case, the granddaddy of the mysteries, if you will, because he historically held authority over a lot of the research positions occupied by the other missing New Mexico contractors.
Let's move to Section 4, Anti-Gravity and Suspicious Deaths.
This brings us to perhaps the darkest and, honestly, the most heavily debated case in our investigation today. This is Amy Eskridge. She was an independent researcher who boldly claimed to have made a massive breakthrough in anti-gravity technology. On June 11, 2022, she died tragically. The local county police very quickly investigated the scene and officially ruled her death a suicide by a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
But the story takes a serious, chilling turn when you examine her digital footprint. Before her death, Amy was actively communicating with a former British military intelligence officer named Frank Milbourne. And in the course of their correspondence, she sent him this exact message. "If you hear any reports that I killed myself, it's not true. It just didn't happen."
Investigative journalist Ross Coulthart points out some deeply concerning anomalies in the aftermath of her death. For one, Amy's body was rapidly cremated without a full, exhaustive coronial inquiry. There were also serious allegations from sources that the weapon was actually found near her non-dominant hand. And in the days before she died, she recorded voluminous videos claiming she was actively being attacked by directed energy weapons. Now, to remain fully objective here, we have to acknowledge the other perspective. Some of her own close colleagues firmly believe she concocted these threats during a tragic, rapidly declining mental health episode. The core problem we face now is that with the forensic evidence destroyed by cremation, it's incredibly difficult for independent investigators to definitively prove either side today.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Conspiracy or Tragic Coincidence.
When we evaluate the primary stances of the people actively investigating all this, opinions are sharply divided. Physics professor Matthew Jediges strongly warns against conflating all these cases into one neat package. He believes some could indeed have nefarious connections to classified research, sure, but others are just entirely unrelated tragedies. TV producer Miguel Sancho totally agrees with this cautious approach. He urges us to take each case in isolation rather than jumping to a grand unified conspiracy theory. Meanwhile, journalist Ross Coulthart takes a much harder line based on his intelligence sources. He genuinely suspects that extremely zealous individuals protecting a 70-year-old secret aerospace program have utilized intimidation, intense bullying, and potentially even murder to keep these generational secrets buried.
Now, suggesting a secret murder program over UFOs might sound like an impossible cinematic leap. I get it. But experts like Professor Jediges remind us that our foundational understanding of reality is currently shifting. I mean, intensive studies by university physicists on the famous 2004 Nimitz Tic-Tac UFO encounter show an object exhibiting speeds, accelerations, and maneuvers that simply defy all known human technology and physics. Furthermore, think about Havana syndrome. For years, the government dismissed the mysterious brain injuries of its diplomats as mass psychosis or stress. Today, the government officially admits that Havana syndrome is a real physical phenomenon and that they were initially wrong. The takeaway here is that sometimes the most radical and improbable hypotheses actually turn out to be true.
Yet, a rigorous investigation requires us to remain grounded in probability. As both Ross Coulthart and former President Trump have pointed out, while the FBI and other agencies are actively investigating these matters, it is highly likely that many of these allegedly connected deaths will turn out to have entirely prosaic, ordinary explanations. Not every unexplained event is a highly coordinated cover-up. Severe mental illness,
tragic random accidents, and mundane crimes are unfortunate, common realities of the world we live in.
But here's what you should really take away from all of this. Regardless of whether the ultimate answer is non-human intelligence, foreign adversaries, or a string of tragic local accidents, the true danger lies in how these cases are handled by the authorities in charge. When local police departments or federal agencies fail to do proper, transparent, and exhaustive investigations, like skipping a full coronial inquiry in Amy Eskridge's case, it creates a massive vacuum of truth. And in that vacuum, wild perceptions, deep suspicions, and institutional distrust are allowed to develop and spread completely unchecked.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. Looking at the missing general, the vanished nuclear scientists, and the tragic, sudden deaths, is the ultimate truth being violently hidden by a shadow element of the government? Or is the grand, unified mystery itself just a powerful illusion built out of isolated human tragedies? It's a question that demands real answers and rigorous, entirely transparent investigations. Thank you so much for diving into the facts with me today. Stay curious, keep questioning the evidence, and I'll see you in the next explainer.